How Pleasure Can Ruin Our Lives, Huxley and Modern Slavery, The Hidden Pleasure Trap. You wake up, reach for your phone, scroll, sip your coffee, click play. Everything feels easy, comfortable. But deep down, do you feel alive? In a world where every emotion can be soothed in seconds, what happens when pleasure stops being a gift and becomes a trap? Not one built from force, but from sweet convenience. This video isn't here to shame pleasure. It's here to ask a deeper question. What are you trading away for the comfort you never question? We'll explore how dopamine, distraction, and digital ease are slowly numbing your sensitivity. Not through trauma, but through tiny daily habits you don't even notice. If you've ever felt strangely empty despite having everything, this may be the video that names what you couldn't explain. Take a breath. And stay with us till the end, because this might not just change your thoughts. It might bring you back to yourself. When pleasure becomes the sweetest trap, imagine a world where every moment of your day is programmed for your comfort. Every unpleasant emotion is blurred out with a single tap, a short video, a new package arriving, an afternoon milk tea, or a notification from someone, online or off. All of it promises one thing: instant pleasure. At first glance, it seems like paradise, but what you're not warned about is this: that so-called pleasant joy is the beginning of a kind of invisible slavery, where people are not chained by force, but lulled into submission by pleasure, a trap so sweet, no one realizes they're in a cage. In the modern world, we're not controlled by fear, but by comfort. No one forces you to live a certain way, but every ad, every algorithm, every convenience silently nudges you toward that path. When pleasure becomes the measure of happiness, anything that requires effort, endurance, or delay gets eliminated. The trap isn't that you're not allowed to feel joy. The trap is you've come to believe that instant gratification is the only thing worth chasing. And in that chase, you lose the ability to experience deeper joys, from real connection, from creativity, from self-understanding, from living with meaning unique to you. Pleasure is not inherently wrong, but when it becomes the center of your life, that's when you stop living. You're merely reacting to bursts of dopamine, and with every such moment, you drift a little further away from yourself. Huxley's warning about freedom in disguise. In his novel Brave New World, Aldous Huxley didn't describe a society oppressed by guns or censorship, but a world where people willingly traded their freedom for comfort. No more violence, no more resistance, no more pain, just a smoothly operating society filled with people who always felt happy. But that happiness was artificial, sustained by a drug called soma, making people feel good no matter how meaningless their lives were. What makes Huxley's warning terrifying is not its science fiction, but how real it has become. Today, we don't need soma. We have social media, 24/7 entertainment, and packages that automate every emotion. And just like in Huxley's world, people now quietly give up depth, struggle, pain, personal ambition in exchange for easy satisfaction. Huxley wasn't against progress. He was against the distortion of concepts when people start believing that consumption and entertainment equal freedom. But real freedom is not doing whatever you want. Real freedom is the ability to recognize what has meaning, what must be resisted, and what you're willing to endure in order to live true to yourself. Modern society doesn't need to oppress. We voluntarily surrender as long as our emotions are stroked just right. Huxley saw this nearly a century ago. But the real question is, can you see it playing out in your own life today? The modern-day soma you're addicted to. You don't need to swallow a soma pill like in the novel to become dependent. Because today's soma isn't a drug. It's your smartphone that never leaves your hand. The personalized content feeds. The one-click highs that make you feel good without any effort. No one forces you to use them. Yet you repeat the habit like a survival reflex. And that's the scariest part. Every time you scroll for something new, every time you lose yourself in endless videos, every time you choose the easy comfort over effort, you're taking another dose of digital soma. It doesn't destroy you instantly, but it quietly steals your focus, your sensitivity, your real-life energy. Modern soma is packaged as convenience, entertainment, trends. It doesn't crush you, it numbs you sweetly. And you don't notice because you think you're choosing it, but really you're being led by a system designed to keep you in constant consumption. The danger isn't that you use technology. It's that you no longer know how to stop. You can't tell the difference between entertainment and escape, between relaxing and emotional numbness. You're not addicted to a product. You're addicted to the comfort it brings. And if you don't wake up, that comfort will become the ruler of your life instead of meaning, depth, or truth. When instant gratification numbs you to everything, there's a quiet paradox most people never see. The more we live in instant pleasure, the more we lose our ability to feel. The things that once made you happy now feel dull. A song, a meal, a hug, none of them seem to stir real emotion because your brain is now conditioned to fast hits, to dopamine spikes from social media, games, news, images. Your mind is constantly overstimulated by dozens of triggers at once, so there's no room left for subtlety, slowness, or depth. Psychology calls this emotional numbness. When people are exposed too often to artificial pleasure, they begin to lose sensitivity to genuine feelings. Like someone who drinks too much coffee eventually stops feeling alert, no matter how much more they consume. This adaptation doesn't just make you resistant to pleasure, it makes you empty. Because the natural joys of daily life no longer hit hard enough to feel worthwhile. That's why so many people feel empty even when they're happy. They have every comfort, constant entertainment, but no real connection with themselves or others. Emotions are dulled, moments are blurred, true joy replaced with shallow stimulation. You're not wrong for wanting to feel good. But when you only seek instant pleasure, you trade away your capacity to feel what's truly deep. And once you can no longer be moved by what is real, you lose touch with who you truly are. The pleasure treadmill, the more you chase. The emptier you feel. Have you ever asked yourself why you always need more? One more episode, one more video, one more shopping spree to feel better. But the satisfaction never lasts. What once excited you eventually becomes a hollow habit. That's not your fault. It's the natural law of what psychology calls the hedonic treadmill. Modern psychology shows that humans quickly adapt to any level of happiness. Whether it's the joy of receiving a gift, going on vacation, or achieving a major goal, the initial excitement fades, and you return to your previous emotional baseline to feel that same rush again. You'll need more, stronger, newer, faster. This loop repeats endlessly, a treadmill with no end. In today's world, systems are built to keep you running. Social media never runs out of content. Ads constantly make you feel lacking. Consumer platforms whisper, just a little more, and you'll feel complete. But that feeling of enough never arrives, because the goal isn't your happiness, it's to keep you slightly unsatisfied, just enough to keep consuming. Emptiness doesn't come from having nothing. It comes when everything you have no longer makes you feel truly alive. And when lack becomes your emotional default, you keep running, not toward something meaningful, but to fill a void you can't quite name. But here's the truth. That void can't be filled with pleasure. It can only be healed through deep confrontation with yourself. Technology and the dark side of convenience. We live in the age of convenience. With just a few taps, you can order food, watch a movie, chat, even find romance, without leaving your seat. Technology has transformed how we exist, making everything faster, easier, and more effortless. But behind the sleek surface lies a quiet cost that few want to face. We are gradually losing the ability to tolerate discomfort, and with it, the ability to grow. A 2020 study revealed a troubling link between excessive screen use and a rise in psychological disorders like anxiety and depression. The ease that technology offers doesn't just weaken emotional resilience. It makes people dependent on a digitized rhythm of life. Every time you feel bored, you don't sit with your emotion, you reach for your phone. When you're anxious, you don't face it, you seek distraction. Technology is no longer a tool. It has become a refuge from your inner world. This emotional automation leads to a kind of existential numbness, where people no longer want to feel pain, no longer dare to dream, no longer have the patience to dig into anything meaningful. We snap at slow-loading pages, lose patience when someone takes a few minutes to reply. But the real danger isn't that technology makes us weak. It's that we begin to accept that weakness as normal. And then In a world where every uncomfortable feeling is muted by convenience, can you still tell the difference between real life and a simulated emotional version designed by systems? Viktor Frankl and the fundamental question, what are you living for? While the modern world does everything it can to make you feel better, Viktor Frankl, psychiatrist, philosopher, and Holocaust survivor, asked a bolder question, what are you living for? Not, are you happy? Not, do you have enough comfort? Not, are you liked? But, what is your life connected to that's bigger than yourself? Frankl believed that human beings cannot thrive without meaning. When meaning is lost, we don't just become aimless, we become vulnerable to cheap substitutes, consumption, addiction, escape. Because in existential emptiness, people will do anything to avoid looking into the void, even if it means fooling themselves into thinking they're okay through shallow pleasures. Frankl's philosophy is especially urgent in our time, because he didn't define happiness as comfort. He defined it as the willingness to endure for something valuable. To him, happiness isn't something you chase. It's a side effect of living in alignment with personal meaning, and that meaning doesn't come from grand achievements. It comes from whether you're creating value, whether you're truly connected, whether you're committing yourself to something greater than your own survival. Frankl once said, when a person can no longer change a situation, he is challenged to change himself. In a world drowning in easy pleasures, the thing we need to change isn't how we consume more, but how we dare to look deeper. Not to escape pain, but to ask ourselves, am I still living a life with purpose, or just filling time with fleeting sensations? The seemingly harmless choices that are guiding your life. It's not the big decisions that shape your life. It's the tiny choices repeated every day. Scrolling a few more minutes on TikTok, or reading a page from a book, replying to messages, or sitting quietly with your emotions, shopping to feel good, or accepting sadness without needing an instant solution. These actions seem harmless, but over time they become the foundation of your entire lifestyle, mindset, and your relationship with yourself. The truth is, you didn't choose them consciously. You react by habit. And in a society designed to optimize comfort, every reflex leans toward ease, speed, and avoiding discomfort. And so, you let algorithms, ads, and the digital pace lead you little by little without realizing that you are being led. You don't need a big crisis to lose yourself. You only need to keep saying, I'll do it tomorrow, just a few more minutes, I deserve to relax, until these choices pile up. And one day, you look back and realize you've taken a turn you didn't intend. That's why awareness doesn't begin with a dramatic wake-up call. It begins with this quiet question, is this choice serving something meaningful? Each time you choose to stay with a real emotion instead of avoiding it, each time you delay comfort to prioritize what's right, you pull yourself closer to who you truly are. Life doesn't shift direction from a grand decision. It shifts from small choices, repeated long enough. And you, only you, hold the real power behind each one. When did deep joy disappear? Do you remember the last time you felt truly happy? Not because of a package arriving, a like, or a compliment, but because you felt alive, connected, and fully present in the moment? Most of us lost that feeling long ago, to the point where we no longer even realize we're missing it. We've been swept into a world where everything must be worth the money, worth the time, worth sharing. Joy has become a kind of performance, dramatic enough, fast enough, eye-catching enough, and in the process, we forget that deep joy, the kind that comes from quietly listening to a friend, finishing something difficult, or sitting still after a chaotic day, is never loud, but always real. Aldous Huxley once said, man has an almost infinite capacity for taking things for granted. And when you live in a world saturated with pleasure, the danger is that you begin to take even happiness for granted, something you feel entitled to. From there, you grow impatient with anything that doesn't offer immediate gratification. The more you live in easy pleasure, the more you lose your ability to feel the simple things, the very root of deep happiness. A warm glance, a quiet afternoon, a moment of stillness in a chaotic world. They no longer move you, not because they've lost value, but because your mind has been so worn down, it can no longer absorb what's real. When we stop feeling joy in what's real, we begin to crave what's fake. And that's when we begin to lose our way, not through some grand mistake, but through no longer knowing what we actually need to feel whole. The attention economy. When you become the product in today's world, you're no longer the customer, you are the product. What's bought and sold each day is not just your data, but your attention. You think you're being entertained, browsing freely, choosing what you like. But in truth, thousands of algorithms are choosing for you, all designed to keep you engaged as long as possible. Because every second you linger, someone makes money. This is what the tech world calls the attention economy. Social media, video platforms, even dating apps, they don't just sell services. They sell the ability to occupy your mind. And their most powerful weapon is pleasure. Not refined pleasure, but fast dopamine hits. A funny video, a provocative image, a notification saying someone likes you. The problem isn't that you're being entertained. The problem is you're slowly forgetting how to choose consciously. When you're trapped in a stream of endless content, you stop asking, what do I truly want? What am I even looking for here? Your mind gets filled, but not with value, with fragments of stimulation, not enough to nourish you, but just enough to keep you from feeling hungry for meaning. Worse still, you start equating attention with self-worth. The more people interact with you, the more valuable you feel. But you don't realize what gets the most attention is rarely the most authentic. Usually, it's what's shocking, digestible, viral. And so you trade authenticity for visibility. You trade depth for views. And little by little, you sell yourself, not through contracts, but with every tap on a screen. A stolen brain, the dopamine manipulation mechanism. You think you're in control of your phone, but in truth, it's controlling your brain bit by bit every day. Each time you get a notification, a like, or an unexpected message, your brain releases dopamine, the neurotransmitter linked to reward and pleasure. But the important point isn't that dopamine makes you feel good. It's that it makes you repeat behavior. Research by neuroscientist Robert Sapolsky shows that it's the anticipation of pleasure, not the pleasure itself, that produces the biggest dopamine spike. Meaning, you're not addicted to the reward, you're addicted to hoping something will happen. That's why you keep checking your phone even when nothing's new. Because your brain has learned to crave the possibility, and that craving is the true addiction. Tech platforms understand this better than anyone. They design content, notifications, scrolling, and loading mechanics around random reward systems, the same model used in slot machines. You never know what comes next, so you keep scrolling, waiting for that one dopamine spike to make it all feel worth it. You might think, I'm just browsing a little for fun. But in a world optimized to keep you online, every time you lose control of your attention, you lose a little bit of your ability to steer your own life. And the more you lose that ability, the more easily you're manipulated. Not by force, but by the illusion of harmless fun. Dopamine isn't the enemy. But when it's exploited constantly, it turns your brain into a reactive machine, not a center of will. And when your life is driven by reactions to external triggers, you're no longer the one making decisions. You're just a puppet blind to the strings. The loss of self-control, the invisible price of a comfortable life. No one tells you that every time you choose the easy path, you're giving up a little of your self-control. We often think of losing control as explosive, rebellious, boundary-breaking acts. But in truth, it usually happens quietly, when you slowly lose the ability to choose consciously, letting life be guided by unconscious habits. Modern life gives us endless convenience. Food at your door, entertainment on demand, instant communication. And along with it, something silently disappears, the ability to endure discomfort. Because you don't have to wait, to struggle, to go without. You also don't get to build inner strength. And so self-control isn't eroded by pressure, it's worn away by comfort. When you're always able to do what you want, whenever you want, limits fade. But paradoxically, it's limits that shape who we are, that help us know what matters, what's worth it. True freedom doesn't come from having every option. It comes from knowing how to reject the ones that don't align with your deeper values. In a world where comfort is the standard, self-discipline becomes strange, even seen as rigid or outdated. But only when you can control yourself will you stop being controlled by others. Self-control isn't just a skill, it's the foundation for living a life with direction, instead of drifting in pursuit of pleasure. The price of living too comfortably is forgetting that you once had the power to choose the harder, but truer path. And once that power is gone, you'll start living the way others want you to, all while believing it's your own choice. That's the quietest trade-off and the most heartbreaking one. The culture of ownership. When consumption becomes a reason to exist, we live in a culture that makes you believe you are what you own. Every ad, every media message, every online trend whispers to you, buy more, upgrade, become a better version by owning more. And so consumption no longer serves needs, it becomes the way we define self-worth. Philosopher Erich Fromm once warned of a dangerous shift from being to having, from existence to possession. When you define yourself by what you own, you also hand control of your identity over to the market, and the market will never allow you to feel enough. Because if you feel enough, you stop buying. If you stop buying, the system stops running. The problem isn't that you buy a new phone or shop occasionally. The problem is you start equating happiness with the feeling of ownership. You believe that a new item, a new location, a new service package can heal your inner emptiness. But as Viktor Frankl once said, when a person cannot find meaning, they fill the void with pleasure. And pleasure, while understandable, is only a temporary drug. The sad truth is, society applauds this lifestyle. You'll be praised as successful, stylish, someone who knows how to enjoy life. But deep down, you still don't feel like yourself. Because no item, no matter how expensive, can replace the feeling of truly being alive. That feeling can't be bought. It only comes when you dare to live, not just spend. Consumer culture has turned life into a possession showcase. But in the end, what makes you feel fulfilled isn't what you hold in your hands. It's what you hold within, and that cannot be bought. It must be built through awareness, boundaries, and real connection with yourself. Inner avoidance, the common habit of the existential age. If you ask why modern people are so drawn to pleasure, the answer may not be that they seek too much joy, but that they're doing everything to avoid themselves. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their soul." And that's never been more true than today. In a world of noise, with millions of pieces of content produced every minute, you never have to sit alone with your sadness, anxiety, or unanswered questions. You can just play something and have those feelings instantly numbed. We've learned how to eliminate discomfort instead of listening to it. When we feel lost, we open a show instead of asking, "Why do I feel this way?" When lonely, we go online to find someone to talk to. When life feels meaningless, we spend, scroll, or sarcastically joke, instead of confronting the emptiness with courage. Ironically, it's this avoidance that keeps us in disorder. What you avoid doesn't disappear. It waits in the unconscious, silently influencing your choices, reactions, and relationships. No pleasure is strong enough to replace an emotion that hasn't healed. No fun can fill a void that hasn't been named. Modern life gives you every tool to forget, but almost none to understand. And if you don't dare to enter yourself, you'll always live like someone running away, running from wounds that never healed, running from the question, "Who am I?" And ultimately, running from your own life, even while smiling, posting, and living each day. Recognizing the unconscious, the first step toward liberation. The danger doesn't lie in pain, it lies in not knowing that you're in pain. Not everyone realizes they're living unconsciously, where behaviors, decisions, and even feelings are just repeated reflexes from old patterns. Avoidance, self-indulgence, impulsivity, consumption as emotional escape. You think you're choosing. But in truth, you're following well-worn paths, shaped by culture, society, algorithms, and unhealed wounds from the past. We live without truly being present. And the more we consume, stay busy, or settle for easy pleasure, the farther we drift from realizing we're no longer living according to our own will. Carl Jung called this being controlled by the shadow. When you haven't made your unconscious visible, it controls you, and you call it fate. So the first step toward freedom isn't changing the outside world. It's stopping and asking, why am I doing this? Where does this emotion come from? Does this pleasure nourish me or just make me forget? Awareness doesn't come from a dramatic revelation. It comes from seeing yourself in your smallest choices and having the courage not to run from what you find. It's a long journey, But every time you notice an unconscious pattern and choose differently, you reclaim a piece of freedom you didn't even know you'd lost. Freedom isn't something you achieve overnight. It's the result of repeated awakenings, hundreds of small moments where you choose meaning over habit. And from there, the true path of liberation begins. Not from the outside, but from the awakening self within. Discipline, the quiet strength to master yourself in a world that glorifies comfort and instant gratification. Discipline is often misunderstood as rigid, joyless, even self-punishing. But in reality, discipline isn't what restricts freedom. It's what protects it from being stolen by unconscious temptation. Discipline is the ability to say no to what you want now, to protect what you want deeply. It's staying when you want to run. It's finishing something meaningful when you feel tired. It's not scrolling to numb your loneliness, but sitting still and listening to it. Discipline is choosing to act from values, not from reaction. Author Jocko Willink said, "Discipline equals freedom." It sounds paradoxical, but the more disciplined you are, the more truly free you become, because you're no longer a slave to your impulses, your pleasures, or your addictions. You begin to steer your life instead of being steered by it. Discipline doesn't have to be harsh, it just has to be consistent. A small habit, done daily, like waking up 15 minutes earlier to meditate, writing down your emotions each night, or setting limits on screen time, these are all forms of discipline. And these small acts reshape your brain, shift your thinking, and rebuild your capacity to lead yourself. In a society that says, "Take it easy, you deserve it," practicing discipline becomes a quiet rebellion. But in that rebellion, you rediscover something precious lost in the noise of pleasure, the courage to live with purpose. And there is no freedom more valuable than that. Intentional struggle, the ticket back to yourself no one wants to suffer. But what few realize is this: every true form of growth requires discomfort, uncertainty, and sometimes pain. Pleasure comes easily and fades quickly, but meaning always demands a journey. And on that journey, struggle isn't the enemy. It's the silent companion walking beside you. We live in a culture that glorifies comfort, where pain is seen as failure and effort is dismissed as too much. But if you look at those who have undergone deep transformation, artists, scientists, spiritual leaders, they all share one trait: they don't avoid difficulty. They walk into it with intention. Struggle isn't about punishing yourself. It's about expanding the boundaries of your inner world, building the capacity to endure complex emotions, and learning how to stand firm when there's nothing left to hold on to. When you choose to stay with fear, to do what's hard, to stop running, you send a powerful message to yourself: I believe I am strong enough. Psychologists call this resilience, and it's not built with dopamine spikes. It's forged through repetition, each time you choose to act by your values instead of reflex. The road back to yourself is never paved in gold, but every step across that uneven ground brings you closer to something you've longed for but feared to face: a life with purpose. Struggle won't make you great, but it gives you what pleasure never will: an honest, full-bodied connection to yourself. And sometimes, that alone is a quiet victory powerful enough to change your whole life. Awakening from the pleasure dream and starting to live for real, we've been taught how to chase happiness, but few of us have been taught how to awaken, to look inward and ask, is this life truly mine, or just a chain reaction of habits, emotions, and desires planted by others? If you've traveled through the landscape of pleasure, from drowning in dopamine, to avoiding your emotions, to living for convenience, at some point you'll realize you no longer feel anything real. Everything becomes vague, fleeting, like a dream that won't end, a dream where you consume to forget, rush to avoid, and smile so you won't have to face the emptiness inside. Awakening isn't some grand spiritual enlightenment. It's simply the moment you pause and say, I've been living in the wrong direction. You don't need to blame yourself. Just see it. And from that seeing, you begin again by slowing down, listening more carefully, choosing more deliberately, and observing yourself more honestly. Awakening is when you no longer want to impress, but to connect. No longer live to be seen, but to be felt. No longer chase pleasure, but seek depth. Awakening is when you realize freedom doesn't come from doing whatever you want, but from knowing what is truly worth giving yourself to. And when you begin to live honestly, even slowly, even quietly, even unseen, you're no longer just reacting, you're living by choice. And that is the beginning of a meaningful life, a life no dopamine hit could ever replace. Because now you've found what pleasure could never reach yourself. Self love is not about indulging every emotion these days. We hear a lot about self love, but the more it's talked about, the easier it becomes to misunderstand. People equate it with eating what they like, resting whenever they want, letting go of anything uncomfortable. It's not wrong to take care of yourself. But if self love means giving in to every impulse, that's not love. That's a dangerous deal with your most fragile parts. True self love is often uncomfortable. It's disciplining yourself not to fall into temptation. It's saying no to relationships that hurt you, even if you still care. It's sitting silently with your pain instead of numbing it with shopping, food, or endless scrolling. It's setting boundaries, not because you hate yourself, but because you want to grow. Real love isn't about feeling good all the time. It's about becoming stronger, deeper, more grounded. It doesn't come from letting yourself avoid. It comes from walking with yourself, even in your weakest moments, without turning away. Above all, self-love means not treating your emotions as absolute truth. You can feel sadness without running, feel anger without exploding, desire something deeply and still say, not yet. Society tells you that self-love is about following your feelings. But real love is learning to tell the difference between a fleeting urge and a real need. It's knowing when to hold your pain and when to walk away from it. It's a hard journey, but it's the only one that leads you back to the person you were always meant to become. You don't need to be extraordinary. You just need to start living meaningfully in a world obsessed with success, achievement, and constant self-improvement. Many carry a quiet shame. I'm not good enough. I haven't done anything big. I'm still lost. But the truth is, you don't need to be extraordinary to live a meaningful life. You just need to begin truthfully, one small step at a time. Meaning doesn't live in grand gestures. It's found in your daily actions, a sincere conversation, a kind decision, a moment of honesty with yourself instead of hiding behind escape. Every time you stop and ask, does this make my life fuller? You're living with awareness. Every time you choose values over pleasure, you're walking a path with direction. You don't need all the answers. You don't need to change the world. You don't need applause. What you do need is a why deep enough to live for every day. Nietzsche once wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." That why isn't handed to you. It's something you uncover when you dare to face yourself. We weren't born to be pleasure-seeking machines. We were born to feel, to connect, to create, to leave something alive and real behind. And it doesn't start with a leap. It starts with a tiny decision to live meaningfully, starting today. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't to change your whole life, but to slow down, listen to yourself, and quietly begin again. And once you truly begin, that alone is something extraordinary.